Hello and welcome to another episode of the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. Joining me on the phones from the reveal of the Chevy Corvette, the C8, the mid-engine Stingray, is road test editor Reese Counts. How you doing, Reese?
Doing all right. A little early here on the West Coast, but it's good.
Cool. We're going to break down the Stingray from all angles. This is a special edition of the Autoblog Podcast. Also here in the studios in Detroit is assistant editor Zach Palmer. He was up late last night covering this car from all angles. A lot of the words you'll see in that main story were also authored by him. He's written some follow-ups this morning. What is up, Zach? I imagine you're kind of tired too.
I'm a little tired, but I'm also super excited to talk about this car. It was totally worth staying up late last night to watch the reveal. I am pumped.
Me too. It's a good feeling when I'd say you're sort of like up late working on something important like we all were. And then the next morning, it's like everybody's together kind of rehashing it. So let's jump right in. Reese, we'll start with you. You were there in person, gut reaction. What do you think?
I am beyond excited for this thing. When it first rolled out with Mark Royce behind the wheel, I wasn't in love with the design. As the night got on and I had a chance to get inside and walk around and see a few variants, it's grown on me a lot. But outside of the looks and just the exterior looks, in my opinion, this thing is awesome. When he dropped the price or relative starting price of under $60,000, I was blown away. It's truly shocking that they're offering a car with nearly 500 horsepower that'll hit 60 miles an hour in under 3 seconds for under $60,000. I think a lot of us were thinking this would be a good deal if it was like 70 to 80. Nobody makes a mid-engine car at this price point, save for the Porsche Cayman and Boxster. Yeah, this thing's awesome. It's got all the things you want about a Corvette. It's a naturally aspirated V8. It's still big, looks like it's going to be pretty comfortable. Storage is excellent. They were really happy to show off that you can get the target top in the rear, the golf clubs. I'm stoked. I mean, I am super, super excited about this thing.
Okay, so Zach, you were at your computer all last night, breaking down this car right as the cover came off. What did you think?
I absolutely loved it, just like Reese. And I think that most enthusiasts out there are going to absolutely love this thing. I think they did a great job with the design. I think it's a great evolution of Corvette. You can see the Corvette styling characteristics in there, even though it's still super different. And then, you go to the interior and, this is a total revolution. It feels so much more upscale, so much more luxurious. And, I absolutely love the whole cockpit design that they have in there. You have the two huge, all digital screens, and, the one 12-inch infotainment screen is canted directly at the driver. I love that kind of thing in a car. Everything, just looks like it has been designed in there for the driver. And, all the specs too, just like Reese was saying, 495 horsepower with the Z51 package. You have so many different configurations that you can have too. There's a ton of performance options. I think this is a huge winner for GM. And when they said it was under $60,000, I was flabbergasted, just absolutely floored by that base price. Of course, it will get more expensive, but the fact that they're able to make this transition from front engine to mid engine and hardly increase the base price at all is just absolutely shocking to me.
I think what they're trying to do is, I think they're not as worried about maybe turning a huge profit on each car. I think what they're trying to do is sort of go with the notion of changing what the Corvette is. And if they make money, which I bet ultimately they will, but right now I think the idea is keep the Corvette what it is in that same price segment, and then, worry about the profits later. They sell plenty of Silverados. That's where in Tahoes and Suburbans, that's where the money can come in. And then if the margins are a little thinner, and, obviously Chevy's not going to talk about what the margins are on their car, but I think they might be willing to take a bit of a hit to keep the Corvette price what it is while switching sort of, the layout, the configuration. I mean, my initial take on the car is I love it. I love the design. I saw it and I thought, seeing it without camo on it, seeing it without like the really photoshopped up, press photos, just seeing it on the live stream, I was pumped. I thought this looked like, in some ways, what like Ferrari design looked like when they really were just killing it. I think Ferraris look great right now, but I think they're getting a little complicated, like a lot of, luxury and sports car makers are. I think this is a pretty pure design. The only thing I don't totally love is that sort of like trim thing going through the doors, and that's kind of nitpicking. But up front, it looks great. I think they managed to like create a really sporty yet elegant silhouette, which is cool. Love the fact that the engine that they just announced right away is a naturally aspirated V8, 6.2 liter, just under 500 horsepower with the performance exhaust. That to me is like the best way to kick things off. So I'm excited. Some controversies, I guess we could get right into that. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal, and we've seen some other, other sites sort of playing up this controversy that Corvette loyalists are not going to be into this mid-engine layout. I've got my own thoughts, but Reese, we'll start with you. Do you think that is a controversy, or is that kind of like almost like a made-up argument, perhaps that's being pumped up by some really diehard Corvette people who aren't, evolving?
I think it's somewhat valid, but so the typical Corvette owner is older and retired and somewhat, I wouldn't say super well off, because part of the Corvette charm is it being relatively affordable, but you can't keep selling to those people. I mean, eventually they die and stop buying cars, and you have to like move the car forward, and if it alienates some of the older buyers, so be it. It still wins on a lot of the points that people want from a car. It's affordable, it's practical, it's probably still going to get like crazy good fuel economy for what it is. My only worry is mid-engine cars do not handle like a front-engine car, and I think some people are going to get in it and not kind of know what to do. Now, Taz Jukter, the chief engineer, was very particular about saying we've tried to like tune out some of that. It's a very balanced and very neutral car, but the mid-engine layout, it just changes the dynamics. So I think more than anything, people are going to be a little surprised by the way it drives, but I think it's a bit of a false argument. I don't think it's as big of a deal as some people are making it out to be.
I think that they did a pretty good job of actually, incorporating some of the elements that maybe the older buyers might like. They came right out and said, this is going to fit 2 full golf bags in the trunk. And, you have that there, and then you also have the engine right in front of it. And it really, obviously you don't have the massive hatch that you used to have in the C7, but I think that 2 golf bags is fantastic for a mid-engine car. You don't see anybody from Ferrari, even an Acura NSX, which is built as a super practical supercar, that's not going to fit 2 golf bags in the trunk. But Chevy managed to do it. And there's also a frunk. I wasn't sure if they were going to take advantage of that area. Maybe it just wasn't in the cards, but they did it, and they deserve props for that. And another thing that you get with mid-engine cars, they're typically built with carbon tubs. This one is not. This is an all aluminum frame, and because of that, you get a much easier ingress and egress versus any kind of a supercar out there. You get inside of a McLaren, and you sort of have to just plop yourself down in there. It's not as easy to get in and out of. Whereas this car, I think, from photos and from what we've seen so far, I think that people are not going to struggle anywhere nearly as bad as they were in a typical supercar.
Yeah, my opinion is that this sort of mid-engine controversy is a little overblown. I frankly wasn't even aware of it until, I just started reading about it a little bit more recently. I guess, us as industry insiders, this has been such a foregone conclusion for so long that I wasn't really aware that there was sort of this kind of, undercurrent, that there was like, a bit of, dissonance with just the whole strategy. But I don't think it's that big. I think what's going to happen is this could attract some, definitely will attract some new buyers who are going to be super psyched to get this, aluminum intensive 500 horsepower mid-engine supercar for, under 60 grand. I mean, that's an amazing deal. Like when I think about the different kinds of vehicles I would like that I would really enjoy driving in my life, I look at things like the Jeep Wrangler, the Miata, of course, the BRZ sports cars, or like really rough and tumble SUVs. The 4Runner comes to mind. And then all of a sudden you can tell me, well, wait a minute, the Corvette does all these things. And this is like the price that, it's not cheap, but it's also not something that you need to be a celebrity to achieve that level of sort of, financial success in your life. This is a car that is going to be very attainable for a lot of people. I think, the controversy could come in, perhaps in a way that I'm not anticipating, if the driving dynamics are a little tougher than some people think. Like the first time I drove an Alfa Romeo 4C, I thought, man, this car is rough. This thing is raw. It sounds like the engine's trying to like rip off your head. It was a very small car too. And it was very, sporting, and, it was an intense car. Let me put it that way. So I think Corvette, when we drive this thing, I hope they will have a bit of a balance, that this still is sort of your everyday sports car, and they maintain that ethos while doing it with a mid-engine configuration. So we'll see. Again, I feel like 80-20 here, like 80%, this is like not a big deal. And I do feel like maybe there's 20% of the people out there, maybe I'm underselling it, who are more upset about this than we think. But I mean, I don't know. The other thing too, this might be a generational thing. Like, I'm the oldest one on this call, and I'm still not that old. And to me, there's nothing wrong with a mid-engine. This is like 100% the right move. To me, staying front engine would be the wrong move. I'm not seeing the other end of this. So, I think they totally made the right play here.
So I've talked to some of the engineers, and I've talked to some of the race drivers of the C7R. And from what I understand is they're about at the limit of what they can do with a front engine rear drive platform. You look at the ZR1. I mean, it's got tons of aero just to keep that car stable and handle that much power. And you move to a mid-engine platform, and it totally changes the car. But yeah, they've pretty much reached the limit of what they can do. And I think another big key is this helps separate it further from the Camaro, which over the past few years has slowly creeped up and like gotten right there with the Corvette in terms of not only like performance but price too. And it really goes to separate these two cars. I've always been a Corvette fan. I think for the money, it's just been the more special car. And some of the higher, I would take a lower spec Corvette over a higher spec Camaro. But I think that's something to remember too. But yeah, I agree with you. I think the argument is a little overblown.
Cool. The other controversial part of this, I was seeing more of this on social media, is the interior has a lot of buttons. Now, I think that's interesting because we're always talking about how like touch screens look cool, but for many of us, they're simply unusable. And in a car like the Corvette, you want a lot of buttons because you don't want to be toggling through different screens. What do you think, Reese? You were there. I mean, I can tell you what I think from the pictures, but too many buttons, just the right amount. How did it look in person?
It looks way, way, way better in person than it does in photos. The interior, I don't like the steering wheel. I think the squared off steering wheel is a little too hokey. But the rest of it is really like pretty stunning. There was one car last night that had like a real nice like brown interior that was pretty good. I love red leather, and there was a white over red car on the stage towards the end without a Z51 package that looked good. But I think the button issue is a little overblown. I mean, nobody's ever happy. It's either too many buttons or too many things are hidden in touch screens. I would personally rather have this like big row of buttons where everything's kind of together and wraps around to the driver in a cockpit style, then like, we've talked about Volvo on this podcast before. Everything in their infotainment is just hidden in the screens, and it kind of sucks. So yeah, I don't mind the buttons at all.
I'm with you. What do you think, Zach?
I'm right there with you guys too. And I guess I kind of understand where people are coming from because it looks a little strange at first blush in a photo on social media, but I would absolutely prefer these physical buttons over having some weird touch capacitive strange thing hidden in the touch screen that nobody can figure out. I feel it's way better for a Corvette buyer who, this is a performance car. You want to be able to get to a button quickly and just sort of know where it is.
Yeah, and
I agree totally.
And if you think about the people buying these cars, like we were talking earlier, they tend to be older, and that generation tends to be a little less tech savvy, and they don't want to deal with like flipping through menus and doing all this stuff. I mean, they've really kind of simplified things. They were talking about there's a Z button on the steering wheel, which just you press that button and it turns the car in its sportiest setting like automatically. Either Taj or Royce was I can't remember who was saying it, but think about like going out of it to a track. You pull out of the pit lane, you hit the Z button, and the car just puts itself in the sportiest setting. So many other cars you kind of have to like fiddle with the settings. We had a M car last week, and there's 6 different settings for the transmission, and there was 3 different settings for the engine and suspension, and it becomes a little much. And I like that they've kept things relatively simple. If you want to dive in, there are menus, there are stuff that you can get through, but I really like having the hard buttons. And the interior as a whole, it looks and feels really nice. I mean, truly premium. The leather feels good. The buttons and stuff are all aluminum. I mean, it's comparing it to old Corvettes is not that hard. Corvette interiors have historically been pretty rough. The C7 is not too bad, but it's still not the greatest thing out there. But yeah, this is far and away the best Corvette interior that's I've ever seen, and I've seen them all.
I thought that just the pure number of color options that they're offering too. There are 6 different interior color options. There's 2 reds too, which is sort of shocking. But hey, totally bring it on. And then on top of that, there's 6 different seatbelt colors. That feels somewhat Porsche-like. They do a lot of different seatbelt colors there, and Chevy's sort of taking a page out of that book, and I'm all for it.
I was just about to mention the Porsche thing too. I mean, the whole thing feels very 911 inspired.
Very cool.
Yep.
I'm curious too, Reese. So you were there. What else stood out, like from the event? Talk about the suspension, any engineering notes, anything like that. I know we mentioned that there's very little carbon fiber on this, which frankly, that's like kind of the history of the Corvette. Is it's very aluminum intensive, and then as you go up in the different like trims, that's when they start to layer on the carbon fiber. But what else kind of highlights stood out to you?
The transverse leaf springs are gone. That was one of the first things I went and looked. They had a ton of displays. I mean, it was a really cool reveal. I mean, tons of people. I think there was 1,500 people there last night. But it was pretty big access. They had a cutaway display of the car kind of on its side so you could see the whole underside. One of the things I went and asked one of the engineers was like, hey, do you guys still have the leaf springs? But they've done a lot of work. I mean, this is truly like all new. I mean, there's really nothing that like carries over from any of the old cars. They've done their work. The kind of 4 corners, the suspension mounts, where it's this neat die-cast process that supposedly makes it stronger and supposed to cut down on like price because they can just pump these out because they build a lot of these. I mean, they build way more of these than like Ferrari builds their mid-engine stuff or Lamborghini or anybody else. And to keep it affordable, they have to like be able to do this easily and quickly. So the fact that they've managed to do all this at a reasonable price point is pretty amazing. The whole chassis is aluminum, no steel or anything. There's no carbon fiber either, like you said. But once the Z06 and presumably ZR1 come out, I expect carbon fiber fenders, hood, roof panel, whatever. Um, but the standard car is probably going to be relatively light for a car of its size and price. But yeah, it's. I didn't get as much of a chance to dive into it with the engineers. I mean, there was just people swarming these things all night. Um, but yeah, the level of detail, it's all the engines are now dry sump oiling, so they can place it low. That was really no surprise. Corvettes have had dry sump for years. I mean, the Z06 had it with the C6. I think it was a bit part of the Z51 package on the C7, but now it's standard, and it's truly a like cohesive design. And I can't imagine how much work went into this with those guys, because I mean, this was all new ground for them. None of them had ever worked on anything like this before. It's There's a reason this thing took decades and decades to come to fruition, just because it was such an engineering stretch for them, and to get it to feel and perform like a Corvette without like rising in cost and doing all this stuff. I keep coming back to the cost because I'm so amazed that they managed to like package this amount of performance and engineering prowess for under 60,000.
I'm curious too. I don't know if they got into any of this, but I know they had Royce and they had Taj there who really, these guys are immersed in the history of Corvette. We've been seeing, mid-engine ideas for the Corvette going back to 1960. And when you consider the Corvette first debuted in the early 50s, you could tell they were thinking of ways to make the Corvette even more capable, with some pretty, futuristic concepts as long as, 60 years ago. So, I think it's interesting. And I've also heard rumors that, the mid-engine Corvette was supposed to come out sometime when the C7 did. But of course, the recession hit. They weren't able to funnel all of this into a new Corvette. So the C7 essentially kind of became a placeholder. Now, I'll admit this is kind of rumors I've heard over the years from just, people I know in the business. But I mean, did they get into like the fits and starts that this has had at all? I know, maybe they don't want to talk about the past, but it seems like this has been closer to coming to fruition a couple times, at least in, since the turn of this century anyway. I don't know. Was there much of a backstory there, Reese?
So they talked quite a bit about the three serve concepts, the Chevrolet Engineering Research Vehicle. I'm pretty sure I've got that right. There was one in 1960, one in I think 64, 65, and then one in 1990. The first serve concept looks like a Indy car, open wheel, mid-engine. I mean, it looks like a pure race car. The second one looks kind of like a Can-Am car. Think like the early McLaren Can-Am cars with tiny like one shell bodywork, big like pipes sticking out of the top of the engine. It was smaller in person than I thought it would be in photos. And then they showed the Serve 3 concept, which was the first one actually branded Corvette. No joke, I had a poster of this thing on my wall as a kid growing up. So seeing it in person for the first time was pretty exciting. And I have to say it lived up to the reputation. But the Serve 3 in particular was pretty special. It was a transverse V8. It was a twin turbo version of the LT5 and the original C4ZR1, making 650 horsepower. Had all-wheel drive, and I believe it also had all-wheel steering. I mean, it was arguably way more advanced than the car we saw last night. But that was kind of the point. But they talked a lot about those cars without really getting into details on why they didn't actually come out, which I think is what we all really wanted to know. But they definitely tapped into the historical nature of the whole thing.
So let's kind of look also to the future. We've been hearing rumblings that some sort of electrification could be in the works, We also saw an image of the convertible last night, which is literally the next obvious thing we know they're going to do. Of course, they're going to do like a convertible. But Zach, talk a little bit about the potential hybridization of the Corvette.
Yeah, so, right after the reveal, of course, everybody has questions. Is this going to be a hybrid? Because they have a whole new electrical architecture for this completely new platform, and Chevy hinted at it. There was a report from Autocar that it got the quotes from Chevy from saying, we'll see down the line, the car can do it. Hey, hint, hint, we'll see. And you'd fully expect. I feel like we've fully expected for a while that Chevy would try to incorporate some sort of electrification into the Corvette. It makes sense with their strategy of trying to greenify pretty much everything in their lineup. And we know for a fact that hybrid sports cars, hybrid supercars are awesome. They're really fun to drive. Ferrari just revealed their SF90, which is a plug-in hybrid supercar. The NSX has been out for a while. Obviously, the 918 is on another level. But, something like this for, I don't know, maybe in the range of $70,000, $80,000 would be really, really cool. And it's kind of, weird to think that, you're going to go faster than sub 3 seconds to 60. But if you do some sort of electrification concept, you could bring in all-wheel drive, which always increases traction off launch. So you could be seeing maybe something in the mid-twos for a hybrid C8, which is exciting, to say the least.
Yeah, I think, obviously, I think they did the right rollout strategy here. Pivoting to the mid-engine configuration, you are going to have some dissenters. But, stick with the naturally aspirated V8 with about 500 horsepower. That's just like the right recipe for the first car. Let people kind of, unpack what this new Corvette is. But yeah, let's roll through like the Z06s, and some of the top trims. Then I think they absolutely should get a hybrid in there sooner rather than later. And then I would love to see a full electric Corvette. I think, so it's 2019, 2022. Do that. You would take down Tesla. You would get all kinds of amazing press. I think it would totally change the dynamic of what the Corvette is, what Chevy is, what General Motors is. I think they absolutely should do that. I think this new architecture gives them a good deal of flexibility. I think, again, it could be an all-wheel drive type of situation. I would really like that. And I think even if they did go all electric, I think they should still keep the naturally aspirated V8 as part of this Corvette portfolio. I think the whole point of having a halo car is to make it stand above the rest of your line, but also to give people choices. So, I think this is just the tip of the spear, tip of the iceberg, and they should keep adding different variants, including electric.
So when I talked to Andreas Pruniger at the New York Auto Show last year about a hybrid 911, he was pretty open about it. He's like, yeah, it's probably coming. He's like, not anytime soon, but when customers demand it, we'll do it. He said their current crop of customers really don't care, and I'm sure it's probably the same way with the Corvette. They've baked it in. It's probably ready for it, but they are not going to do it until customers, presumably younger ones, want a greener performance car. So I agree with you guys. I totally see this coming in the next few years, but I think it's still a few years off. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Like Zach said, every hybrid supercar we've driven is pretty awesome. Even if they did just a 48 volt mild hybrid system in this, similar to the Mercedes EQ Boost system, that thing works wonders, and it makes a turbocharged engine feel like a naturally aspirated engine. And if they could do something here, just even with naturally aspirated, yeah, I think it'd be pretty awesome. I don't think it's going to come out in the next few years, but I would definitely say it's probably going to come out within the C8 generation.
What also just in general was the mood last night, Reese? I know you were at the reveal in what apparently was an old airship hangar, is what we were kind of piecing together out there in California, I believe. You were in Orange County. It sounded like there were over 1,000 people there. It seemed like watching the live stream, people were super fired up. I thought Mark Royce, who's the General Motors president, and then, Ted Juchter, who's the longtime chief engineer, were good presenters. A lot of people were asking where Mary Barra was, who's the CEO. Did you find that out? And just what was the general mood out there, Reese?
I didn't see where Barra was. She was not on the ground from what I could tell. I had a pretty good seat. I was right behind all the GM execs and the two astronauts, Mae Jemison and Scott Kelly, that were there, which was personally
Very cool.
pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So I don't know where she was, but Royce was pretty excited, as he usually is with the performance cars. The mood was pretty hot, so I went and found one of the GM PR guys to ask him, I'm like, who all is here? I mean, is it owners? Is it all media? Said it was about probably half media and a lot of dealers there, and the dealers were over the moon for this thing. Every time they announced something like, the fact that it's got the big storage, there was a big cheer, especially when the price point. I mean, they're excited. They want to sell these things as much as we want to buy them. And the mood was pretty ecstatic. I was hoping there'd be more owners there because I really wanted to talk to some of those guys and like get their opinions of it. But yeah, everybody seemed over the moon. I was talking to some other journalists there. I think we all kind of went into this pretty skeptical, not knowing what we were going to see. And I think for the most part, it exceeded our expectations. My personal biggest thing is I don't like the way it looks, but I was not. I'd say the opinions were pretty split. But yeah, everybody seems pretty excited about this.
Cool. Let's kind of wrap up here with the spend my money segment here, kind of one we're gonna just kind of sketch out here. But before I do, any final thoughts on the actual Stingray? We'll start with you, Zach. Just final impressions here.
This, somewhat of a segue actually, with that spend your money. This Corvette is the first one that I would consider buying, I think. I've always really liked the Corvette. I've always thought it was an awesome car, but it has never really struck my fancy like this one has. And I think that's special. And I think that's what Corvette's doing is, trying to find some new buyers, some new people for it. They've caught me. I am 100% all in on this car. And I absolutely love the feel of a car with a mid-engine layout. The handling's fantastic in a C7, but I have a feeling that this is really going to put it over the edge for true sports cars enthusiasts who really value that mid-engine driving characteristic.
Yeah, well said. Reese, closing thoughts on this?
I'm excited. More so than I thought I was going to be. I was pretty skeptical. I've driven at least one of every generation of Corvette, most of them multiple times. I have some strong feelings about this that go back, literally like my entire life. I'm excited. They could have easily screwed this up, and all signs point to them not. So, I'll have to wait till final judgment until I drive it, but yeah, I'm excited.
So the C7 was the first Corvette that I was like, oh, I think I could see myself owning this. But now that I look at the C8, I mean, I have that sort of like range of emotions and even more some. Like, I'm really excited about this car, and definitely in a way that I was, not excited about the C7. I think the price really gets to me because I think they're over delivering on the promise of what the mid-engine Corvette could be. And I think that's a great thing. And I also think, to me, there's something really appealing about a roughly $60,000 mid-engine supercar. Like, of course you could get an amazing Corvette currently right now or other supercar but how much money do you want to pay and how much, crazy things are going on with it. I like that essentially the entry level car, quote unquote, gives you all of this performance, all of these pure driving dynamics. It looks awesome, I think, and it's at a reasonable price. To me, that is really a strong hook. So I am super psyched about this as well, more so than I'd say I was this time yesterday. I think, having seen it now, I'm pretty fired up. So on that note, let's spend some money. Normally we spend other people's money. Today we're going to spend our own, we'll say fictional money. Here's the scenario. You have got in a certain amount of money, we'll say about $60,000 because that's the price of the starting price of the new C8. What do? Do you buy a new C8? Do you try and get a good deal on a C7, which as a refresher starts about $56,000? So they're going to be about in that same area. So I don't know. Does it matter if you could get some sort of good deal or maybe a special model on the sell down of the C8? Or do you dip back into history and use that money to get a classic Corvette and, maybe fulfill like a childhood dream or something? So Reese, we'll start with you. What do you do?
This is really hard for me. I'm just going to give you two answers because I can't decide. If I was buying a classic Vette, classic maybe is not the right word, but an older Vette, I'd go for a C401. I mean, that was like the Surf 3. I had that poster on my wall growing up. I think it's a truly special car. I think the exterior design of the C4 holds up. I've driven them. They're not the best handling cars in the world, but they feel truly, truly special. So I might go with a C4 ZR1. But if I was buying a new one, I would try to score a deal on a C7. I was checking the prices yesterday. You can get a good deal on a C7 Z51 manual for $55, which is less than a base Stingray starts. And that's one hell of a car. You won't get the new mid-engine stuff, but the C7 I know is a good platform. It's reliable. There's tons of support. I still love the way it looks. So I'd either go with the C401 or a new Stingray or C7 Stingray Z51.
Zach, go ahead.
Hey, I think, you mentioned the manual transmission there, and that has been one thing that has been, sort of hanging over my head with the C8 is the fact that there is no manual transmission. And, many years back, I just told myself, I would never buy a car that doesn't have a manual transmission. My opinions have changed over time, and, there are some really great automatic transmissions out there now. And I think that I would buy the C8. I think I would absolutely go for that over the C7. I just, like I said before, I really like the old Corvettes. I think that they're great cars. I think that the C7 is fantastic, but that mid-engine is calling to me, and I don't think that there's any way that I could turn that down for, a few $1,000s more than a C7. This car, it's actually reminding me a little of when the GTR came out, when the new R35 GTR came out, and it had all that power and all that performance for that little of price, and it feels like Chevy has sort of done that again, and I don't know, that really, really appeals to me, and I'm going to take the C8.
I'm going to think out loud here. So right now I'm going to rule out the C7. Like the car, but to me that, as I look through the long lens of Corvette history and then what we now know about the C8, the C7, the C6, they start to fade away. I mean, and frankly, if I'm looking to drop about 60 grand or dip into the vintage realm, I'm not going to worry about getting some maybe potential sell down. Who knows? They probably won't even do that. So to me, it boils down to a C8 or a 1961 Corvette. I just really love that generation of Corvette, that era. I think they're gorgeous cars. Sort of that concave paneling, what Corvette was doing in racing in the late 50s, early 60s. I really think Chevy and Corvette sort of summed up just the aspirational notion of what, America was trying to do at that time as the jet age was really taking shape. Maybe I really, took a big drink of all the moon landing stuff that was going on last night. That whole everything from the JFK speech at the early part of the decade to actually landing on the moon back in 1969. I mean, I really think Corvette sort of spoke for the high part of that generation of cars and design and performance and tech. And, a little bit, it might sound cheesy even for the US. I mean, it really is, a halo car to get kind of cheesy. But then it comes down to what would I do with it? And I wouldn't drive a 1961 Corvette as my daily driver. I can't imagine putting 2 sets of golf clubs in that thing. So if I wanted a toy, I'd probably go with the 61. If I wanted a car that I would probably drive many times a week, I think I'd still probably have like a 4Runner or something in the garage. I'd have to go with the C8. It's a very drivable everyday supercar. And I think right now that's how I'm feeling. Maybe I'm being a bit of a prisoner of the moment as far as like the C8 is just a new cool thing. But that would be a car I could commute in and live with and also have a heck of a lot of fun with. So guys, this has been fun. This has been a great show. It's always fun when we get to talk about one car that sort of transcends all other cars or news of the day. Any final Corvette thoughts? Real quick, Zach, anything? Last thought, Corvette.
I want one.
Reese.
I want to drive one.
Ditto. On that note, we're going to end things out here. Thanks for being with us this week. Please send us some spend your monies. We'd like to do that as well. Let us know what you think of the new Corvette. Reach out to us on all of our social platforms. Be safe out there. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.
Hey everybody, this is podcast producer Eric Meyer here. I just wanted to chime in at the end of the episode and let everybody know that Autoblog has merchandise now. We've got t-shirts, coffee mugs, hoodies, throw pillows, you name it. You can find it all at redbubble.com/people/Autoblog, or you can just search Autoblog on redbubble.com. As always, thanks for listening to the show, and we'll see you next week.